Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven here with some haunted stories. Hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. Hey, just want to keep this short as possible. I want opinions on my encounter with a demonic entity. I'm a Canadian, and I was living in Germany right when COVID happened. Everything was closed at this point. I was strolling around the city with a buddy at 3 a.m., and we spotted a nun, wearing all white and had a white face, walking back and forth through a window. Keep in mind this is very, very late, and the church was closed. Though it didn't look at me, I definitely felt like it noticed us. I go back home to Canada, and I started getting very bad dreams. With the first dream, I was in a medieval Germany, and I was running from something. I end up getting into a car and look to my right and see a witch, and then look back at the steering wheel, and then the car blows up, and I wake up. The next dream is in my house, and it's me alone, and my house is all red and dark. I go downstairs and see an entity with red eyes facing a corner. He soon turns around and starts walking towards me with a red powdery substance in his hands, trying to blow it in my face. I quickly run to the kitchen and grab a knife. I then stab this entity in the neck and wake up again. At this moment, I'm feeling shocked because my dreams went from Germany to now where I live back in Canada. The last encounter happened in my room. I was lying in bed and suddenly my heart starts beating really fast and I get goosebumps all over. Keep in mind that I was not sleeping and I was fully awake. I then put the blanket over my face, hoping it would be okay. There was a little opening where I could see the floor and I would notice a black figure standing beside my bed. At this point, I started repenting and saying, "God save me." As soon as I said that, this blanket ripped off my face and the entity started screaming in my face. It was an all-black entity. Couldn't really make out a face. I kept on repenting while this thing was in my face. Eventually, it got sucked up in itself and disappeared. After that night, for 2 weeks, I would see a silhouette of a shadow man in my room. I couldn't deal with it, so I simply spoke to it and said, "You can leave now." Since that night, I have not encountered anything else. Number 2. This is a true story. It was Mother's Day, and I went with my 5-year-old son to visit my mother's grave. We brought flowers, prayed for her rest, and sought protection from any evil. Everything was calm, and we had a normal day. However, something strange happened afterwards. My son told me something that disturbed me deeply. He said, "There's a boy watching us, and he's following us." I asked him where the boy was, but I couldn't see anyone behind us. My son pointed with his tiny little hand, but I still couldn't see anything. In the following days, life went on as usual. I went to work during the day while my son attended school. After picking him up, we returned home together. But after 2 weeks, I started hearing my son playing and talking with someone. It struck me as odd because it was just the 2 of us living together. When I checked on him, I found him playing with his toy soldiers. When I asked him who he was talking to, he replied, "It's the boy from the cemetery. He says he wants to be my friend." Goosebumps ran down my spine, and I was left speechless for a moment, watching him play and converse with someone I couldn't see. Days went by, and my son's behavior changed drastically. We hardly did anything together, as he spent hours locked up in his room playing with his invisible friend. His appetite decreased, and his school performance suffered. His school teacher even called me into a meeting due to his lack of attention and failing grades. I decided to take him to a psychologist, but little could be done. The psychologist attributed it to an imaginary friend and diagnosed him with the attention deficit hyperactive disorder, suggesting regular visits to improve his condition. However, after 2 months, there was still no improvement. Then one Sunday, my son suddenly returned to his old self. He called me mommy all the time, wanted to play with me. He even said he was hungry and asked me to prepare something. I felt joy and relief in those moments and dared not to ask about his friend, afraid he might return to his old behavior. But that happiness didn't last long. Same afternoon around 6 o'clock, he froze while opening the front door, staring at nothing. When I approached to ask him what was wrong, his answer was chilling and still continues to haunt me in my nightmares. My friend went to find his other friends from the cemetery. They're waiting outside, wanting to take me to play in the graveyard, he said. My mind conjured up images of the garden filled with children who had passed away long ago, coming to take my son away for some inexplicable reason. I closed the door, locked it, and carried my son in my arms, retreating to my bedroom where he stayed, not daring to venture outside. There were moments when I peeked out the window facing the garden, praying a lot, begging that they wouldn't take my son. Meanwhile, the sound of knocking on my door intensified, as if someone was trying to force their way in. I turned on the TV, raising the volume to drown out the noise. My son innocently approached the window and said, "There's a lady with a stick hitting the children. Look." My heart sank as he described the exact appearance of my deceased mother on the day of her burial. Number 3. A couple weeks ago, I went camping with my boyfriend, my mom, and my mom's boyfriend, C. As soon as we got to the campsite, I felt as though something was off. I felt like I was a stranger entering someone else's home. Because of these feelings, neither me nor my boyfriend could sleep the 2 nights we spent there. The first night was weird. When my mom and I went to bed early, I swore I felt something touch place underneath me. The camper we were in pops out on both ends for 2 places to sleep that are a few feet off the ground. I also know it wasn't anyone I was with because the guys were talking over by the fire, about 10 yards away. My mom was on the opposite side of the camper. All throughout the night, I kept waking up with a feeling of dread. And as it was beginning to become lighter, I woke up to an alarm. It was crystal clear, and I could even feel the vibration from my phone. In fact, it was the Sencha alarm on the iPhones. I almost got up to turn it off, but instead I decided to try to ignore it and go back to sleep so I didn't wake everyone up. I was the only one awake at this point. Later, after we all had gotten up and we were getting ready for breakfast, I mentioned the alarm. My mom said something along the lines of, "What alarm?" Her and her boyfriend looked at me with confused expressions, and then I said, "What do you mean, what alarm?" "You, my mom, or C said it. I even picked out the sound, and I heard, but at the point they didn't believe me and looked at me like I was crazy. The rest of the time there just felt weird, and I wanted to leave. I usually love the outdoors and the mountains. Feel like home to me. I don't know if anyone will even read this, but I thought it was worth a shot to try and reach out." Number 4. I never post on Reddit, but I can't seem to find any information elsewhere, so here we go. Incident setting: Middle Tennessee, summer 2020, around 1 a.m. Central Standard Time. It was the COVID summer, and my 2 friends and I were dreadfully bored. The 3 of us spent a lot of time driving around to Sonic or the miserable state of Iowa. We also went randonauting several times. Gas was cheap and it was fun to go down roads we hadn't ever turned onto before. On our 3rd or 4th trip, we had done 2 very normal locations with goofy intentions set and saw nothing out of the ordinary. We decided to do 1 more location before calling it a night. We always had our perimeter set small, not wanting to go further than about 30 minutes out from our town. The 3rd location, with the intention of just showing us something, gave us coordinates less than 5 minutes from my grandma's house in a neighborhood. When we got to the location, there was nothing. It was a random road in a suburb, all very quiet, dark, and normal. But as we went to leave, with the Maps app guiding us, we ended up getting lost in the neighborhood. Somehow we ended up coming up on the spot again from the same direction as before. But this time, all 3 of us in the car saw a brightly shining gold figure in the middle of the road, probably 20 or so feet from the front of the car. We were silent until it moved to the side of the road behind a car parked on the curb and disappeared. Without addressing what we just had seen, all of us started to say, "We need to go," almost simultaneously. It wasn't till we were back on the main road that the question of, "Did y'all see that too?" was finally raised. We all agreed on the limited features we saw: gold glowing about 4 feet tall and no definable features on its orb cylinder shape. We didn't know what to make of it then, and we still go, "Hey, remember when?" to each other every now and then. After that night, we didn't go randonauting again. My friend started hanging a cross necklace from her rearview mirror. None of us are the type to believe in physical manifestations of the supernatural, and I can't think of any rational explanation for what we saw that night. As I mentioned, I don't really post on Reddit, so if you have any recommendation or any subreddit that this would be better suitable for, please let me know. Other than that, just looking for ideas of what on earth we saw that night. Thanks. Number 5. My friend went to a campsite over the weekend. When she got back, she told me everything while completely shaking. She was staying on a campground in Burns, Tennessee. She told me that the cabins were separated from each other, and everywhere in the distance were trees. Each night, there would always be twigs breaking, but she couldn't see it because it was completely pitch black. She told me that she's a light sleeper, but not even the most quiet noise can wake her up, which she thought was very strange. The last night she was staying at the campground, she was asleep like always, but then she woke up to more twigs breaking, but it sounded almost like that thing was right at her window. She jumped out of her bed, grabbed her phone and turned on her flashlight and looked through the window. She couldn't see anything, so she decided to open the front door to the cabin. As soon as she was about to tell me the rest of the story, she started crying. It took a while for me to get her to tell the rest of what happened, but after a while she was finally able to tell me the rest of her experience. She told me that as soon as she opened the front door, she flew back to the floor, saying to herself, "Why was this thing here at this cabin every night while I was staying here?" She stood up, slammed the door, shut it, and quickly locked it. She told me that as soon as she got back from the trip, she's been waking up at 3 a.m. every night after that experience. She started seeing glowing white eyes and a huge smile. She always turns on the lights in her room, but nothing. Every night, before she goes to bed, she thinks about that smile, saying to herself, "Who was that and why was I their target?" The next day, we started doing research. None of that stuff had anything to do with the experience my friend went through. This is a true story. If you don't believe me, ask my friend Kyle. She still wakes up at 3 a.m. till this day. Alright, y'all. My voice is still shaky and iffy, so this was a quick 5-story read. I love y'all so much. I hope everyone is doing okay. I am getting over my sickness, and I'm hopefully will be back in tip-top shape, in a week or so. Alright, I will see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross